Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Encore Palm Beach County for this special presentation, Next Act, Living Life to the Fullest. We have a wonderful guest. I'll be introducing you to her in just a moment. I just want to share living life to the fullest is one of the tenets of Encore Palm Beach County. I know you hear a lot about volunteerism and connecting with work opportunities, but everything we do at Encore Palm Beach County is about creating your best life and quality of life. So keep that in mind when you hear from our special guest about the wonderful life that she has and what she is sharing with us. And I'm very happy to introduce and bring on Joyce Perrin. Good morning, Joyce. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everybody. And it's a pleasure being here. I can hardly wait to share some of my stories.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us a little about your background as to how you got here, and then we'll go into a little bit more of the meat of your last 30 or so years.
Thank you very much. Well, my background is I started out in nursing and graduated from the University of Alberta. And then I went on to take a master's in health administration and also a program at Harvard. And so with that, I walked up the ladders in the healthcare field and became a CEO of a Toronto hospital. But then I had a divorce and I had 3 children who were all married. And so I was sort of an empty nester. And back in my mind, it started years ago when I was at home as a young girl growing up. We had these books, and maybe some of you will remember them. They're called Lands and Peoples. They were a blue book series. And in that, it planted the seeds for my unstoppable curiosity and exploration of people of the world. And I wanted to explore and nurture my dream to travel the world. And, it was put on hold until I was married. And then my children had flown the coop. And I said, hey, this is my opportunity. So I took a job in Saudi Arabia. And that's how I started to see the world.
You have such a great background. What gave you that love of travel? What enticed you?
Well, my mother, when she died, she had gone to 79 countries. And, she died at 98. And when she was 95, we took a cruise up through the Northwest Passage and up through the northern part into Iceland. And we ended up in Spitsbergen, which is a protectorate from Norway. And there she saw a picture of Amundsen, who was the first person to see the South Pole. And I had been to the South Pole twice, and I knew all about him and his travels and experiences. And my mother said, oh, he came to our house when I was a young girl. I said, well, that's very interesting, Mother. But then I began to think about it. And on the ship, there was a gentleman who knew Amundsen history. And Amundsen learned how to live in the North by living with our people in Northern Canada in the Arctic. And he stayed there for about 1.5 years before he ever got to the South Pole. And guess what? When we put all the pictures together, he had to come and visit my mother's house because her father was the lands and titles officer on the Northwest Territories in Alberta. And we all figured it out. He would have to come there to get permission from him to go to the North Pole. And all the years fit together. Would you believe it? So I have this real love of the North, whether it's the South Pole or the North Pole. But that was a real thrill. So my mother really instilled a lot of this travel in my heart.
That's amazing. That is amazing because you were raised with that love. So
Yes.
it's innate. It really is. So when did you decide to travel solo? When did you decide to go out on your own?
Well, that was when I left Canada and worked in Saudi Arabia for 3.5 years. And then after that, that was when I decided to do my traveling. And I traveled solo throughout my trips, except for one when my son, Bruce, and his new wife, Cindy, left Canada and came with me, and we went to Cambodia and Vietnam. And those were two very, very meaningful and sad trips. Cambodia was the saddest trip I have ever had. And when we were there, we had thought that the army had left. Well, they hadn't, and we were shot at when we were looking at some of the buildings in a remote area. So we came back and were told we had to stay in our hotel. The police were everywhere. And the next day we flew out of Cambodia at Angkor Wat and flew to the capital, and everything was going well. But our plane went up, it took a sharp turn to the right, and we thought, oh my gosh, what's happening? But we talked with the pilot afterward, and he did that just in case somebody was going to shoot us down. So that was quite a little bit of a scary trip. For sure.
Oh, I could imagine. I could imagine. So in all the different countries, just remind us how many countries you've been in.
I've been to 156 countries and 31 territories. And a lot of the territories are like the Caribbean islands that are a territory of Britain. And so those are territories. And in the front of my book, you can see this map. I'll show it to you because it gives a pretty good perspective. All the dark countries are where I've been. The white countries are where I have not gone. And many of the countries in Africa, you can see a big glob there. Those were countries which were not safe when I was there, like the Congo. I could not go there at that time. But everywhere else, I went and I had a wonderful time.
I was going to ask you about, did you always feel safe traveling alone? But
well, I've had one incident in the book that was a little scary, but we managed that. Other than that, it's very interesting. When you're traveling alone, people talk to you. And everybody there was so friendly and so helpful, except for this one kind of instance, which turned out okay. It's just talking to people that is so important. And they send their love to you, and you send their love back. You send their love to them, and they send it back to you. And it's that communication that makes it bond. And I'll tell you a story. I was in Zimbabwe, and I was feeling, it was a rainy day, and I had to move my room, and I got a terrible room, and it was a terrible day. So I was walking down the street and saying, this is the worst city I've ever been in. Then I stopped in my spot, and I said, well, this is very interesting. You traveled to a lot of countries, and how come this is the very worst one you've ever been? And I realized it was my own attitude. And that attitude was spewing out to other people, and they were just avoiding me like the plague. So I started a little story, and I said, I'm going to speak to people. And I said, oh, hello, it's a great day. And somebody said, what's good about it? So I thought, well, okay, let's go on to the next person. So I went through and I was talking and talking, and then somebody invited me to come to church. I'm just going to church here, come with us. So I came in and sat down, and I was chit-chatting with the lady beside me, and then they said, oh, do we have any people from other countries? Of course, the minister's right up there, and this was in Zimbabwe, so I was very noticeable in the audience. And so I scrunched down in my seat. I didn't want to talk. And they pointed to the lady behind, introduced me. She said, this is Joyce from Canada. So there was nothing else to do but get up and say where I came. So then I went down and met the people afterwards. And a lady invited me to come for soup after the church. So I said, oh, okay, that's great. And that lady and I remained friends, and I visited her 3 times in the rest of my African trip. So you see, the moral of the story is just open your heart, put a smile on your face, and people will react. And I really did prove to myself that it worked.
You know, I love that about you. One of us is getting some feedback. If you're not already muted, please do. And okay, so someone trying to get in. And I should have mentioned at the beginning to the guests who are participating here that they want to have a pencil and a pen and paper, because Joyce is full of inspiration. So you may want to take some notes on some of the things that she offers. Joyce, how did you manage with the different languages in all the different countries?
Well, this is very interesting because most of my traveling was done before cell phones, certainly before the internet, and we were doing faxes, and you had to line up to make a phone call across to North America. Even when I was working in Saudi Arabia, we had to send faxes and use a telephone, and you had to pay a lot of money, and you only had like 5 minutes. You could only speak for 3 minutes sometimes, or 5 minutes, because there were so many other people wanting to use the lines. And so, but with that, as time came along, you know, I didn't have my own, I never traveled with my cell phone until after I had lived in Panama. But you know, the first country that was using little wee cell phones, and they were so generous with their time, was South Korea. They had these little cell phones, everybody had them. And I would say, can I pay you will you call this number so I can make a reservation? And they would say, oh, don't pay me anything. It only costs pennies for this. And so they would make the call and make the reservation. So I was getting pretty good at that. And it took me a long time to get my own cell phone. But South Korea was a very interesting place because they taught me how to make kimchi. And it is delicious when it's made the right way. And I lived with a family. I stayed with them, and that's the way I loved to travel most, was to stay with a family in a homestay.
Very interesting. And how did you get around if you didn't have a cell phone? How did you know, where to find things or how to find things?
Well, we used to have a book that we would travel with, and what we would do is they'd have, say, a place about South Korea, and they would have information there, and then what you did then was you talked to people.
That's rare.
Yes, you talk to people and you ask questions, and that's how we got information, and that's how I connected, because there was no other way. But what we would do is we'd have the book, so the section on South Korea, I would leave it at the hostel or the hotel I was staying and say, give this to the next person. Or if I saw some people coming in, I'd say, here, take this, you'll need it. I've marked the places to go and see. And so it was a much easier way to communicate with people. because everybody was trying to find out the same information. So when you were leaving a country, you always left something on the bulletin board. This was good. No, don't go there. Do this, this sort of thing. But now, of course, my grandchildren tell me that they just take their cell phone, they book into the next hotel or the next hostel or whatever it is, and they look on the things about people's reviews. But it's not quite the same.
No, because you don't have that connection. I mean, I'm sure that being able to do that with people, you learned more about the culture and about how people lived. I'm noticing that on Facebook, on some of the travel groups, that a lot of people want to have everything planned before they leave and, have everything, all their I's dotted and T's crossed. And they're asking all these questions about how do I do this and how do I do that? And there are some people like you who are answering and they're saying, just ask someone. People are friendly. So, it's very true. I mean, as much today as it was then, unfortunately, we've lost something through the years in how to communicate. So it's really very interesting. And how did you get from place to place? I mean, did you take planes? Were you on a ship?
I did everything. I took buses. Really a very interesting story. Actually, it's not in my book, but I decided one day to travel in Africa. I was doing my African trip and I went there immediately after Saudi Arabia because it's the hardest place to travel. And, excuse me. And when I was going along, I was about to leave, and my dear friend who had just spent 3 months in Africa said, you have to recognize that when you're there, there's no health care. You'll be lucky to find a doctor. And of course, I'm a nurse, and so this kind of bothered me for a minute. And then if you're in an accident, what they do is they throw you on the side of the road. And hopefully your relatives are supposed to come and pick you up, and hopefully somebody will pick you up and take you to the newest place. So I was leaving with that in mind and horrified what was happening. And I said, well, just keep your eyes open and just do the best you can and get going. But I always wore a dog tag. I have this little dog tag with me, and it had my name and it had my passport number and a Canadian passport, and it had my name of my daughter, who happens to be a doctor. So it had her phone number to call. And so I had this around my neck in a chain, wore it all the time. And so I knew that if somebody found me, at least they'd have some sort of communication. My son got me that. And that I really recommend for people if they're traveling alone, that they have something like that with them, just around their neck. It's not noticeable, and but it's always a good idea to have that. And of course, when you're traveling like I did, I had to wash my clothes at night and they had to dry in the morning. And I had always wicking clothes. You have to wear the wicking clothes next to your skin so that it wicks away your moisture in these hot, humid countries. And then I had inflatable coat hangers, and they were wonderful because they were inflated, and so the fabric was not touching each other, and they always dried at night. And then I had shirts and socks that would dry overnight, and you can buy these special things that you have that are really valuable. And I also had a wand which was ultraviolet light that I could put any water, could be filthy looking water, in there, stir it around, keep it for 3 minutes. It will kill everything. And the water is really important. And even when you go to Mexico, they say, oh, well, don't have ice cubes and everything else. But the problem is they wash the food in plain water. And you do get amoebas, and you do get giardia, and you do get sick. And so it's really important to have a good first aid bag with you, and make sure you take a few antibiotics. And what I learned over the years is if you get diarrhea, don't let it just go through you. Take your antibiotics and get it done, and make sure you take some with you. That's really important because it'll make your life a lot easier.
Have you considered, after you finish promoting your book, to start a blog or something about travel tips? Because this is great advice.
I'm thinking of doing some podcasts. And so I'm just looking at that and thinking about doing that and telling a little story, and then inviting other travelers on it and thinking about that. But it's just, it's in the planning stages now. But
Okay, well, it's good. You have something to look forward to. Eduardo is asking, why were you in Saudi Arabia for 3 years?
Well, I was there because I wanted to live and work in a foreign country. As I said, lands and people got me going. And also what also got me going was that I was a Girl Guide, and I really thrived in the Girl Guide organization. I learned me teamwork, it learned me planning, it learned me leadership. And I went to a Girl Guide camp, an international Girl Guide camp in Sweden. And there I met Lady Baden-Powell, the founder of the Girl Guide movement. And we spent a lot of time chatting. I was very privileged. I met her in England, and then again, I met her 4 times at the camp, just because our paths crossed. And as we got to know each other, then she was coming to Edmonton. And when I returned to Edmonton, she was there, and we had dinner together, and she signed my picture with her name. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. But she has a quote. It says, happiness comes not from what we have, but from what we give and what we share. And it's always been my guiding light. And with that, I really embraced that. And that was when I met her, was when I was in university, first year university. So I've had that all through my life. And it's been a wonderful experience to keep me on that path of sharing and helping other people. And so I think the Girl Guide movement, I'm sorry it's not as popular now as it used to be, but I think it was a wonderful, wonderful program for me to be involved in.
That's wonderful. That is amazing. You did also mention to me that you were the first female CEO in Canada. Tell us about that.
Well, I was one of the first. There are a few technical things. So let's just say I was the first in one category, but let's say I was one of the first. And that was a very interesting scenario, because at that time, women were not expected to be in those positions. And it was very lonely at the top. It's very lonely at the top. And you have all these men around, and they have their buddies, and they've been buddies for years, and you're sort of over there, and sometimes they'll include you, but sometimes they didn't. But it worked out well. And so no matter where you go, you just do what you can do, and then you move on and do other things. But I loved working with the World Health Organization. They recruited me after I was in Saudi Arabia. My boss in Saudi Arabia wanted me to stay and work longer, but by that time I was in my 60s, and I felt if I'm seeing the world, and I wanted to climb Kilimanjaro. I wanted to scuba dive. I wanted to do all these things. I had to start moving and switching off the countries and the miles. And so I said no, but so he said, well, I'm going to send your name into the World Health Organization. They need you. So I did get an offer from them to work with them. And then I also worked with the International Executive Service Corps. People in the US will know all about that organization. And I had a lovely time helping out in different countries with them. And then I worked in Guyana in South America with the United Nations Development Program, where I talked about the healthcare program that I had developed for the World Health Organization, and we implemented it. And I did a train the trainer program, and we trained over 150 people to take over that program. And then I left and went traveling to South America. That's all in my book. But it was a great experience, and it was really fun.
So did you actually get to do all those things that you wanted to?
I did. The only place I didn't get to was the Northwest Passage. I wanted to do the Northwest Passage, and when I was able to do it, it was still frozen all year round because global warming had not taken effect. And now it's open, but I've had a few things. I returned to Canada at 80 years old, and I ended up, for my 80th birthday, I got a great birthday present of breast cancer. And then I had 2 eye surgeries that left me blind in my right eye. Then I had a hip replacement and a broken right arm, a fractured pelvis, and a few other little bits along the way. But during that time, I took a master's in creative writing, and I started writing my book. And so that's how I got to get it finished when I was 86 years old.
But none of that stopped you. So you have this sense of just moving forward, moving on, accomplishing great things. And where does that come from?
Well, I think it came from my grandmother. She was a wonderful person. She was ahead of her time. If she had been born now, she would be head of a big organization, I think. But she was the kindest, thoughtfulest person I ever knew. And she really taught me a lot. She taught me a lot to be generous. She taught me a lot to be giving of myself. In fact, a little funny story is that when I was in grade 12, I was waiting to go to university, and I had sort of a month, and we had a wonderful cottage at a lake called Capassoan in Alberta, and we would go every year. Well, this year, I was kind of the older person on the block, and most of my friends were working, but we were going to take a family trip, so I only had so much time, and I couldn't find just a job for 2 weeks. So we were at the lake, and I was kind of not knowing what to do, and I weeded the garden, and I had planted the plants, and there really wasn't much. And I was sitting talking to my gran, and I said, oh, I wish I could do something, that would help people. She said, well, why don't you teach swimming? And I was a full qualified swimming instructor, and I was a synchronized swimming champion. So I knew about swimming, and I was a lifeguard. So I knew all those things. So I said, oh, okay. So I went and I developed a program, and I had 4 different classes. I had the little baby, the infants, the young people, they were 2 to 6 or something. And then I had the next group and the seniors, and I even got my cousin to come. And that was a big accomplishment because they all thought they all knew it all. I said, oh no, we'll have some fun. We'll have some good things. And so they came and everybody came. And so I put on a little program to show what had happened in the 2 weeks, and everybody was happy and everybody displayed everything. And there was a little girl who was a thalidomide girl, and she had lost her part of her arm from her elbow down. It hadn't formed due to the thalidomide medication that her mother took, and she was a twin. And we did a couple of extra lessons, and she was able to, at the end, she was able to swim just like the others, and she almost was as fast as they were. And her mother later came to me and said, you know, it's the first time that I realized my daughter could do things just like the other people. And I thought to myself, oh, that was wonderful. I could give that mother and the daughter a different life perspective. And it was just a thing. And they gave me as a surprise, because I didn't charge for these, they gave me a big suitcase to start my traveling.
Wow.
I did.
Wow. You must feel very accomplished. How does it feel to know that you've done so much in your lifetime?
Well, the thing that really warms my heart is the lives I've touched and how they have been able to do something for somebody else or improve their lives. Because for me, the path is always the journey. It's not the prize. I'd win a prize and it was wonderful to hold the cup, but my thrill was I practiced so hard, or I developed this new routine that was so good. It wasn't the goal wasn't the prize, it was the journey. And I think that's what kept me going all the time when I was traveling, because I met so many, many interesting people. They just always touched my soul. There was something I could always talk about.
That's beautiful. That is such beautiful advice. It's beautiful that you are such an inspiration to so many people. And I think that's the message in your book. So tell us about the book. Tell us about how you got that name.
Well, Ants in My Pants. This is the book. It's available on Amazon in hardcover, softcover, in Kindle. And Ants in My Pants is a true story. In Africa, what I liked to do was stay with the African families, and I often did that. And I loved the homestays. But this organization, one day I was in Zimbabwe, and I saw a notice at the tourist bureau, and it said, homestays, come and stay with Banga and his family. So I paid my money and thought that would be a great thing to do. So one thing about travel in Africa is there is no such thing as time. It just happens. It comes when it comes. And when the bus comes, it comes. And by this time, it had been 4 hours. I had been waiting for the bus, and I talked to somebody, and he said, oh, yes, it will come when it comes. And so I was getting tired of standing. And so I threw my little red scarf on, where I always carry. This is like a big kind of, that you put on the beach when you go to sit down, one of those kind of square things that you can use for everything. So I always carry it. So I threw it on the ground. I sat down, and people were looking at me. They were looking at me, and I thought, they want to say something to me, but nobody's saying anything to me. Well, it wasn't long before I realized what happened. There were ants in my pants, and I was covered with ants. How I didn't feel them crawling up my legs, I don't know. But I had these pants on, And I thought, how am I going to get this out? Well, I started doing the Highland playing. Then I did the Irish jig, and then I did the river dance, and everybody was killing themselves. The ladies went like this, to cover up. They weren't laughing. The men were rolling on the floor. They could hardly keep up. They were on the ground. And finally, the lady said, come here. And the ladies always wore these beautiful long skirts, wide skirts. And what they're for is they pull them out like this, making like a half moon, half circle. And then the women go to the bathroom in the circle, and the men look the other way. This is the custom. So I dropped my pants. I got my underpants off and pulled out all these. And these little ants, they would just on. You couldn't just brush them off. You had to kind of pick them off, with their little teeth like that. Oh my gosh. Well, after a while, I got them all off, got everybody back together, and everybody kind of, when I came out, everybody clapped. Oh, that's how I got the ants in my pants. But it's a double entendre too, because ants in my pants is you're always moving. And that's what I did for 23 years. I took my things, put them in storage, and didn't get them out till I returned to Canada 23 years later. So
wow.
And this is what my grandmother said. My Grammy's homeless. She travels the world, but she's homeless.
So is there one continent that's special to you?
Well, I love Antarctica. Antarctica is really amazing because it has penguins and it has whales and it has scuba birds. And the thing about the penguins, I was able to sit in the penguins with the penguins. And let me see, I'll just show you this picture because it's a great picture. This is it. And you see that?
Oh, wow.
And that's where I'm sitting with all these emperor penguins around. And this little penguin over here came up and nibbled on my toes, which was such a thrill. You can't touch them, of course, but you could do that. And so I was sitting there. And the thing about the penguins, they have two predators. One predator is the scuba bird, and the scuba birds work in pairs, and they distract the penguin sitting on the nest, and they steal the egg. The other predator is the seal, and they get them as the penguins go in the water. And the penguins line up in the line, and then they just jump in the water while the seals are waiting below. They pick them up, they grab them by the neck, they twist them like this until the skin, well, first of all, they drown them. Then they twist them like this and the skin comes off, and they eat the body, and food chain unfolds. It was really very surprising to see it in the wild like that, and to see how nature does one thing for one species and then for another, and how things go. And then, of course, the seals, the sharks eat the seals and whatever, that's the way it is. But it was pretty daunting. And of course, Africa, going on a safari, that's another story. You see a kill too. And that's an interesting experience when you see that.
You've been involved and met with so many different cultures and experiences. How did you acclimate when you came back to Canada?
Well, very interesting. That's a very good question. I've never been asked that question before. But what is happening in Canada? Canada is a very open country for immigration. And now the statistics were that there are as many here that have never been born in Canada that are Canadian citizens as those born in Canada. So it's interesting. I can't drive anymore because of my eye. And so I take an Uber, and often an Uber driver is from one of the countries I've visited. And we start a conversation. And, I talk about a country or a city or something in their country that I've been to. And it's a really quite enlightening. And so we share a story or two, and there's always something I can talk about in that particular country.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful that you have that available to you to help keep that love of travel and learning, speaking about the different countries. But how did you personally acclimate from being on the road all those years to actually settling down?
Well, I didn't have a choice because at my 80th birthday, when I came, I had just been here for 3 months. I got breast cancer, and that took 5 years for me to really get better. It took a long time to feel energetic. And so I used that time to start writing my book. And so it was a gift in a way, because it kept me in one spot, and I just wasn't gallivanting around the world, which I had all intended to do, but that wasn't possible.
It's unfortunate that happened, but in a way it helped you transition back into life.
And Canada has changed a lot since I was here. And as every country has changed over 23 years,
Sure. Mm-hmm.
It's very good. And
so you have lots of great advice. And what would you tell someone today about traveling? What would you tell? I mean, a lot of people, I deal with people who are planning for retirement, and they all say, oh, I'm going to travel, I'm going to travel. What would you say about people? Would you tell them don't wait?
Oh, I would tell them don't wait. I would tell them, well, let me talk about, this is what traveling's taught me. Life goes on day by day, like the ocean waves lapping in the beach. The tide comes in and the tide comes out. It's like a barometer of our feelings. Happiness and sadness, the ebb and flow of the ocean could represent life in general, your life and mine. And so my life went to travel, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was hard work. It was not easy. I was traveling solo. I was traveling on my own. And traveling on your own means it's great. You make all the decisions, but you also take all the blame for every decision you make. So you learn from your own mistakes, and you have to grow. And it taught me a lot to trust and grow alone, and to cherish the unique experiences it brought. And it brought both fun and fear. I learned what was important to me and what wasn't. And what was important to me was connecting with people wherever I went. I did love seeing the different challenges. I did love climbing Mount Kilimanjaro and getting to the top. Oh, but I must tell you, I'm just going to skip over to one thing, because I really wanted to talk about traveling solo. Taught me about to trust and grow alone, and to cherish the unique experiences. And all you have to do is ask people and start the conversation, and that you learn what you like to do and what you don't. And then I listen to my body. I think that's really important. So I could do what I could do and not try to do things that I couldn't do. And a lot of my adventures just started talking to a stranger. And I would say, well, where should I go next? And they'll say this or that. And so I would think about it, and there I would go. Or somebody would say, oh, try this restaurant. And so I would try the restaurant. And one of the funny things was I was eating termite honey.
Ooh.
And I thought, oh, I don't know about this, but anyway, that's what I did. And in some cultures, they eat the termites. It's very interesting, but they were very crunchy and good. So no, you just don't know. Yeah.
You give so much inspiration, and you have such great advice for so many people. So before we open up to questions, I do want to ask you, because I know you and I talked about some of the artifacts that you have behind you, as well as your jacket.
Oh, this jacket. Yes, this material I got is from, let me just stand up so you can see it better. This material I got in Laos, and I bought a bolt of it, and I bought the same kind of design, only in a reddish color, more a crimson color, for my mother. And so when I got back to Saudi Arabia, I had it made into a jacket. And she had hers made into a jacket too. So we were the Bobbsey twins with different jackets from Laos, and the material was great. You go into the fabric store, the silks, you touch them. It's like you don't see these kinds of materials here in North America, or they're so elegant and so pretty. And so that's what this jacket represents. And the masks are from Mexico. They're made of tin. They are not made anymore. And that the other rug on the wall is from Tunisia, and it was made in a factory there. And I bought it and brought it home. And so those are only some of them that I have. And I brought back a lot of masks and a lot of pictures too that I have.
And you brought back a lot of great stories and advice, and I'm sure your family is going to carry on your legacy for travel and your love of travel.
Well, my granddaughter has already done that, and I've got a grandson who loves to travel, and he's well on his way to meeting more countries than I have been to. So that is great. And I'm just so happy that people like to travel and like to meet the people in their places and to cook with them and to eat with them. That's how you really get to know the people there.
This is fabulous, Joyce. I know Eduardo has a few questions, and we're going to open it up. If anyone else has a question, please feel free. We'll start with you, Eduardo.
Thank you so much, Christine. Joyce, you are such a pleasure to listen to. I'm Argentinian by birth, and I know you probably were there, Antarctica, but were you able to visit the other 17 provinces like Bariloche, Mendoza?
Right.
Beautiful.
Yes, I went to, those are two of my favorite places. I love Bariloche. I thought it was fantastic. Ushuaia was another place. And I don't know, do you know Ushuaia?
I've never been to Ushuaia, but I was born in Buenos Aires, and I lived there for almost 16 years.
Really? Oh, Buenos Aires. Oh my gosh. That's such a wonderful place. We were there on this cruise I took around this was before I started my travels, but I took a cruise, and we went to the opera at Buenos Aires. We got on, oh my gosh, we were able to get tickets way up high because we couldn't be on the ground floor, of course, but going to the opera, it was so funny. It was in Italian and with the subtitles in Spanish, so we couldn't figure out anything they were saying.
Oh.
But it was just wonderful. the whole thing is we looked down on all the people, and you were probably one of them on the ground floor. They were dressed so beautifully and so elegantly. It was like going to a fashion show.
Yeah.
The most wonderful thing. And the people there were so kind to us. We didn't have fancy dresses, but we got as dressed up as we could, but we didn't meet the standard of anybody on the ground floor.
Yeah, those were the days. I think things have changed now. The way that you go to the theater, could that have been the Teatro Colón?
Yes. Yes.
Teatro Colón, okay.
Yes.
Beautiful place.
Oh, the inside and the balconies and the gold and the glitter and the lights and just everything. But I could hear everything that was going on in the opera. The acoustics were marvelous.
That's wonderful. The other question that I had was, traveling is very expensive nowadays. Was it just as expensive when you traveled?
Well, I traveled very inexpensively. Number one, I don't like staying in hotels unless I'm tired or sick or something, and I'll check myself into a 5-star hotel. I stay with hostels. I did a lot of homestays, and this was all before the internet and before any kind of cell phones and communication. So it's a very different way to travel then. And I found ways to travel that weren't very expensive. I really don't know if you can do that now. Certainly flights. I mean, the price of flights now is absolutely out of sight.
Outrageous.
You know, you go on a cruise trip to Antarctica, and I think it's $23,000.
Depending on the cruise ship, the cruise line, yeah, definitely.
So, and I always go in small expedition ships. So when we went to Antarctica, we went with 2 helicopters on board, and we flew into the dry valleys, and we saw these mummified seals that were there for billions of years. It was absolutely amazing. I don't think you can do that now. I don't even know if it was a Russian ship. I don't even know if the Russian ships are doing it anymore.
No, you're so fortunate. You're so blessed to have done what you've done when you did it.
That's what I've often said. And I mean, even today, I know that there were a lot of countries I would never be able to travel across Russia the way I did. I spent a month in Russia just traveling across on the train. And you can't do that now. And even going to China, I don't know that that's a place I'd want to go either. The world has just changed so much.
It's changed, yeah. It definitely has. Changed. You're very fortunate that you got to do what you did when you did it.
I am blessed. I really am blessed. And I've said that many times because people won't be able to experience the same things I did because it was a safe time to travel.
Right.
I used to go up to the cockpit on the airplane and talk to the pilots all the time. One story, I even sat in the jump seat as we landed on one city. I mean, those things are not available anymore. Questions? Thanks.
Any other questions? Joyce, I'm going to share the screen and just show your contact information. So while I'm doing that, would you also tell people how they can get in touch with you?
Oh, yes. You can get in touch with me in my book. It's on Amazon.com and .ca. And in the Amazon, in their book, it has all my contact information, as well as if you just go to Joyce Perrin, and you can find me on my website. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and my email is joyce.perrin.author@gmail.com. And my website is www.joyceperrin.com.
Wonderful.
From there, you can contact me directly. I love to hear what you say about my book. And I'm always interested. And if you've got any questions, please just contact me, and it comes right to me. So I answer the emails myself. And whatever you can do. And if you like my book, please put a note on Amazon. I need to get 100. I've got 25 or so now. So I'm getting there, but I need some more. Yeah.
Joyce, you've been a joy, and we appreciate your being here and sharing your experiences with us. I know one of the last things that you and I mentioned, you had a little quote about your passion. Do you want to share that just to close everything out?
Oh, well, my passion is to follow your passion with a smile, no matter how long it takes. The barriers happen, but you can work around them. And that's what I did in my story, getting my book written. And it's brought me so much pleasure, because people have said they've enjoyed reading it. And that's the most important thing. I just want to inspire people to don't be stopped by different things that happen. Just keep moving. You know, it may take you a long time, like 86 years.
And we do have Sheila has her hands raised. Sheila, come on. Nice to see you.
Okay, thanks. And the thing that I said once said Joyce. Joyce, I absolutely love your energy. I can't wait. Unfortunately, I came in late, a little before you and the Penguins, but you're the epitome of, I've been doing a lot of research on aging and reversing aging. And the three main points in keeping us young or reversing aging are connection, curiosity, and creativity. And you're the epitome of it all. I might want to interview you at some point, so I will be in touch.
Please do. I'd be happy to, because I want to share that. That just makes me feel so good, because that's the thing. You know, you get older, but you can always do things. There's always something in the way, but you can always find a way around it.
And I see Rosemary has her hand up. Rosemary, do you want to wrap it up for us?
Well, I was going to leave it at Joyce, but then Sheila spoke up, and everything that Sheila said is what Encore Palm Beach County is about: connecting people, healthy aging, engagement with life, work, volunteerism, and so forth. I just want to say I met Joyce when I was living in Panama at my son's house for 4 months. And Joyce and I met through an expat group. And I didn't realize till today, Joyce, how much you had experienced. I mean, we really never even talked about all your travels. I just knew she was an adventurous person because she was living in Panama and by herself. Not everybody picks themselves up and goes and lives in another country. And so today was an eye-opener, Joyce, about all that you've done. I didn't realize that you had traveled so much after you stopped working in Saudi Arabia for all those years and left everything in storage. So thank you again for sharing.
Oh, well, thank you. It's interesting. I'm having people are telling me that, and I don't know why, but I guess I really didn't talk too much about it when we were there. There was always something else to talk about, and
Yes.
didn't talk about it. But I'm finding now that people are really interested in it, and they really are enjoying the book. And so I'm so glad I wrote it, and I'm so glad it's out there in the world. And I hope that it does inspire all ages, the young people, the middle age, those that are wanting something to do, and even armchair travelers, because my friend who wrote it, she doesn't travel, but she had her big atlas in front of her every time she opened the book, and she would follow me on the atlas. And I thought, well, you know, it's just like you were talking about. You're never too old to learn, and you're never too old to get involved in something. So you do what you can, no matter what it is.
Joyce, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending time with us and for sharing your stories. And I think everyone has enjoyed listening, and you are just a joy and a pleasure. Love working with you.